I would like to invite the moderator to the stage, the one and only Anna Sauerbrey.
The one and only. Thank you very much. My name is Anna Sauerbrey. I'm the foreign editor at Die ZEIT, and I'm very happy to be here today to discuss the future of democracy with two great panelists when it comes to this issue. First, I would start with the guest who's had a very long journey to come here, which is Conor Lamb. He's a member of the House of Representatives, the United States Congress, representing District number 17, which is very dear to me because I went to high school in Pittsburgh, which is part of his district. Conor, would you come up to the stage? And a very familiar face in Berlin, but relatively new to her job, Lisa Paus. She's the Minister for Family, Senior Citizens and Youth. And she's also, you can say, sort of the Minister for Democracy, if you will. Apologies to the Justice Department and the Domestic Department, because she's responsible for some of the programs the German government is running on democracy. So welcome, Lisa Paus. We have 45 minutes to tackle this very important and large topic. But I would like to start with an assessment of the situation as it is right now in both of your countries, and then maybe go straight ahead to solutions and progressive plans to secure democracy in both of our countries. Let's maybe start with you, Conor. In the next few hours, the January 6th committee will convene again, its last session before the very important midterm elections on November 8th. And I've read about it. They will hear some voices again, but they will also try to take a step back and look at what they have heard, how the situation is, what they have learned from the hearings. So if you take a step back, what have you learned and how confident are you about the United States democracy stability?
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me here and for attending. Thank you for that nice introduction. As far as the January 6th committee goes, you know, in the United States, it's often discussed through the lens of politics. You know, what will the January 6th committee's work mean for the November midterm elections? I don't really think that's the right way to think about that. Our country was attacked on January 6th. The seat of our government and of democracy itself in the United States was physically, violently attacked. 5 police officers lost their lives. Hundreds were injured and off the job and had broken ribs and were maimed. And I mean, all sorts of horrible things happened. And the January 6th committee is simply about justice and accountability for that. And I think in a functioning democracy, no matter what the political consequences of it are, you have to have that. You cannot, you know, sort of let that go by the wayside or soft shoe it, because obviously things like that could happen again if there are no consequences. It's very simple, and I think it would change our country forever to have an event like January 6th occur without this sort of accountability. And so I'm very proud of the work of the January 6th committee for that reason. It is necessary regardless of its consequences. But that being said, I do think it has had the effect at least of, you know, strengthening maybe the will and desire and maybe even the fear to a certain extent of the pro-democracy forces in the United States. And obviously I'm a member of the Democratic Party, but if you've had the chance to see that hearing, it is not only made up of Democrats. There are 2 Republicans on there who are not running for re-election at this point, but they really do represent a crucial part of our community as well, which are people who are independents or Republicans who are maybe conservative in a lot of ways, but very committed to the fundamentals of our democracy in the United States. And I do think those hearings have been a way that we've reached a broader audience and just revealed to them the depths of the decision-making and the intentionality to tear down the transfer of power and prevent it at almost any cost. And that is really what those hearings are going to continue to reveal, I think. So as you can probably tell, in a way, I'm proud and optimistic of everything that our system has withstood. You know, in a sense, Trump threw literally everything he could think of at the democratic system, from back in 2016, when I believe they willingly accepted Russian assistance to be elected in the first place, all the way through what happened on January 6th, and the system held, and Joe Biden won, and the Democrats stayed in control. But as far as my assessment of the democracy itself, I think we're in a very precarious position. I think in a lot of ways we may be in a worse position this year than we were 2 years ago, because Trump's, I guess the consequences of January 6th has also been a backlash on the side of Trump's supporters. And you now have literally about 300 people in the United States running for office who continued to deny the results of the 2020 election. And many of them, as you know, are running for jobs where they would actually have some authority to affect the next election in their state, because our national elections are actually really run at the state and local level. And so if even, if even some of these 300 candidates get into the right positions, we could have a true crisis on our hands in 2024, far beyond anything that happened in 2020, and no one really knows the answer to what happens then. So, what we need to do is just stay focused, stay committed, keep the memory of January 6th in our minds in the United States, so that our willpower is not broken in comparison with the people that are trying to break our democracy.
When you look at the maybe the underlying concerns, when you look at the instigation as just a symptom, what would you say? What are the problems America's democracy is facing? Where does that come from?
Where does it come from? It comes from a lot of places, but I always try not to be overly analytical about it. You have one successful politician in our country who decided that he was just going to lie to people every single day about so many different topics, but one of them, and the most destructive, was the reality of the 2020 election. And Trump started telling people, a month or so before the November 2020 election, that if he lost, it would be because the whole thing was rigged and there's no way he could possibly lose, et cetera, et cetera. And he kept doing that after all the time, every day. He clearly is aided by the algorithmic amplification of those lies. So I'm assuming something we'll touch on, and many of you I'm sure have touched on in your panels, is the role of social media technology in this. Clearly a major factor. So all of this contributes, sometimes, and I myself talk a lot about the importance of kind of long-term economic stagnation in the United States, the collapse of the middle class, the transition of communities like the one I represent from being really democratic strongholds in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because there's a thriving steel industry and strong labor unions. And today, many of those people vote for Donald Trump. There are very few steel jobs left. The unions have collapsed, et cetera. But I also don't want to overstate the economic role with respect to our democracy, because if you look at who was arrested and prosecuted after January 6th, most of them were not sort of struggling working class people. So there's something much more going on that Trump has tapped in people's minds, and I think the social media technology has allowed him to do that worse than anyone else in our history.
So, Lisa Paus, we have seen extremist protesters just in front of the doors of the Bundestag, the Reichstag, too, here in Berlin during the COVID times. But at the same time, compared to the United States, German democracy seems rather stable, I might say. What's your assessment? How endangered is Germany's democracy, and what are its problems?
Well, we are a grounded democracy. We feel still, of course, the tradition that we are also fighting democracy because we have other history than the United States. But still, yes, the extremism is rising in Germany, as you know, and it is especially the right-wing extremism which is rising. And we had several assassinations which really made people really anxious about the situation of the democracy in Germany. Even not only left-wing politicians were attacked or murdered, but also conservatives. We had you probably do not know the cities in Germany, but there was not a city mayor, but somebody was responsible for the city of Kassel, which is near Frankfurt. He was a conservative. He was murdered. We had an attack to a synagogue in East Germany, in Halle, where we had some victims, and we also had this all in the last 3 years, and which did really change the opinion of the public, because it was through the parties that the democracy was at stake, and that was an attack to the democracy we have. And in these times, of course, it really is rising. As we all know, we have a special situation in Germany, in Europe right now. We have war in Europe, and this is really very challenging the social situation right now. You will, of course, know that we do have energy prices which are higher than in the States right now, and all the social problems which evolve with that really is a very, very hard stress test for, of course, everybody in Europe, for the societies, and of course also for Germany, and also for the German government. And of course the pandemic, and we now have this special situation, war in Europe, but we come out of a situation of COVID-19, which was a hard stress test for, of course, all over the globe, and which created new forms of problems and of dangers for the democracy. All the kinds of theories, what's it called? Conspiracy theories. So we have a completely new melange of people which distrust the system, which distrust democracy as a whole, and which start to not be reachable anymore. So and they get more aggressive, much more aggressive. So the democracies, the demonstrations we have now are, well, some more numbers, but the main point is that they are much more aggressive than they are before, and the attacks in verbal and also in threatening against all kinds of politicians and others are getting really strong. For example, also my Wahlkreisbüro. Wahlkreisbüro. But I had an assassination to my constituency office, and this is not special anymore. So I'm in a row of people. So this really means that there is a strong change, and well, we are aware of that, and we try to, in the combination of doing something for the social cohesion on the one side, but also strengthening all the groups within the society which are in favor of democracy and help for democracy. These two elements combined are, to my opinion, the thing we have to do right now. That the government says, well, you are not alone. Yeah, we see it, and we do something against this special social situation and threatening, but also that the government can't do this alone right now in the democracy. Democracy lives by the people, and so we also strengthen the civil society. For example, my house right now is on the way to make a law, a so-called law to promote democracy, which helps all the civil organizations and people which are doing things in preventing against extremism, in fostering democracy in all the fields of Germany.
Well, you've already started to talk about the recipes, which I think is a good thing, so we don't get too depressed here. But let's maybe talk about that more. One underlying problem is that trust in democracy and also trust in elections seems to be decreasing, mostly in the United States, but also in this country we have figures that are really scary. And you've talked about people actively working to undermine that trust, also candidates who run for office who are trying to undermine the next election. So what is your party doing against that? What is it doing against groups who stir the hatred, who promote conspiracy theories?
There's some formal legal things that we are trying to do that's nowhere near enough, and that's because we have a giant chicken and egg problem here. To get new laws made in the United States, you have to pass the House, where I serve, on a majority basis. That can usually be done by the party in power. The U.S. Senate is a whole nother matter, and a majority is not enough in that institution. You typically need 60 votes. And the way the Senate is constructed, it doesn't even really represent a majority of America when you're talking about 50 or 60 votes, because every state gets 2 senators. And then you need a president to sign on, and you need a Supreme Court to approve. So on the specific issue of kind of voting rights, democracy reform, very, very difficult for us to fix any of this. The one kind of bright spot that we have is there is a fair amount of consensus that we should at least fix the specific scenario of, if you remember around January 6th, there was a question of what would happen basically when Mike Pence opened the envelopes that had the electoral votes in them. Why we're still using this Academy Awards scenario to like finish a presidential election, I don't know, but we're trying to really fix that to make it harder for anyone to succeed in objecting to those votes, to make it clear that a vice president has absolutely no authority to overturn them. And that law has a decent chance of passing even the U.S. Senate at the end of this year. That's probably our best bright spot in a legal sense. In a political sense, what is our party doing? We're trying to just work harder, take the fight to more places, work like the democracy is on the line, because it really is. And 2022 is one thing, but as we've talked about, if some of these people succeed, the scenarios for 2024 are very bad, and they're bad in a national way. They're also just bad at a local level. We have women, school teachers and librarians that have been working at the polls in their hometown for 40 years who are being physically threatened, by people like this. Pretty persistently, 3/4 of the Republican Party in the United States says that they don't believe Joe Biden really won the 2020 election. So this is an institutionalized view on their side that Republican politicians are playing on and taking advantage of. And the sad truth is that in an environment of high inflation and rising crime like we have now in the United States, it's extremely difficult to get the political debate even focused on these issues. So in many ways, we have to fight inflation to save democracy. And I would say, based on some of the things I've learned this week, I think there's a similar dynamic at play here.
Do you think you have any chance of winning back the hearts and minds of some of those people? Lisa Paus has mentioned, or she has said, that probably there are some people we can't win back. And I think that's not just her saying it. In Germany, there is a consensus that there is a small group, hopefully not too large group, of people that can't be won back. You mentioned the 2/3 who believe the election was stolen. Do you think there's anything that you and your party can do to change those minds?
I know there is. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you right now if there wasn't. So just a little bit of my background for anyone that doesn't know. I was first elected to Congress in 2018 in a congressional district that Donald Trump had just won by 20 percentage points, which at the size of a congressional district in the United States is like 50 or 60,000 votes. I mean, it was a huge margin. Nobody thought we could win, but we just outworked the other guy, outdid him. We got a little lucky in certain ways, and it was extremely narrow race, but we won. And then in November of 2018, a lot of my colleagues repeated similar feats all around the country, and then Joe Biden did it at a national level in 2020. So people changed their minds. I mean, people that voted for Trump in 2016 changed their minds and voted for me. People that voted for Trump in 2016 voted for me in 2018, and then voted for Trump again in 2020. That happens. I mean, it's not an enormous group, but if I'm in the camp of thinking, if we can appeal to people's basic economic interest, the safety and security of their family. Your average family in the United States is making somewhere around $60,000 a year, but they're under enormous pressure from costs that are not quite the same here when it comes to health care, when it comes to prescription medicines, when it comes to sending their kids to university, which we pay a god-awful amount for in the United States. And so all these things create a stress environment around the middle class that we really need to take on to have success with the people we're talking about.
What's a good argument? What's a good argument to use, which you know is successful?
Right. The argument this year and in 2024 is largely going to be, promises kept. We did what we said we were going to do. When Joe Biden ran in 2020, what he said was that he was going to get to work physically rebuilding America, rebuilding our roads and bridges and water pipes and broadband and schools and healthcare system, and he was going to make the jobs all for union members, and we were going to use American-made steel and other products. And we've legislated far more of that than anyone thought we could when we had literally no majority in the United States Senate. We did it all. The problem was inflation happened because of the pandemic and the Ukraine war and some other factors in between. It is still raging very hard. So, one phrase we would use is that you always got to worry about the alligator closest to the boat. And if you're one of these families that's kind of right there in the middle in my district, yeah, it's nice that in 5 or 10 years, all these investments are going to pay off and the country's going to look different and we might have a better manufacturing industry and all the rest of it. But right now I'm paying hundreds of dollars or more a month than I did last year at this time. And my retirement account and my higher ed savings account are probably in worse shape because of the stock market. So we don't have a great answer on that, frankly, except to try to say we've done everything we can. The factors are coming from outside. But if you see us take a loss in November, that would be historically normal for the president's party to lose power in this situation, and this will probably be why. And we just have to, there's no magic bullet. We have to make inflation go down, and we're trying everything we can, and I think it will go down in the natural course of things, but that's what we have to get to succeed.
Lisa Paus, would you say that there's a good recipe for Germany too, just tangible change in people's lives, new schools, new roads, better infrastructure? Does that help to make people trust in democracy?
Well, of course, it was always the promise of, it is also the European story that after the Second World War, it was the combination of Wohlstand, prosperity and democracy, which paved the road into the European economic community and everything we know now from the European Union. And of course, if the prosperity is in trouble, the faith and the trust in democracy very fast also gets into trouble. So of course, it's the well-being is a cornerstone, and that's the reason I also said that right now this government does everything that we get the social cohesion, that we save the social cohesion within the society, and that we also do everything to get the inflation down and to get through the winter, to depress the energy prices, and also make us more independent from Russia, from Russian energy, that we foster the renewables into climate change and so on, of course. But at the same time, this is not the only field we have to work on. That is our message, at least. We have also to strengthen the faith into the democracy at its own, for its own reason. And if we look into the polls in Germany, the numbers who are against the democracy and right-wing activists, extremists against the democracy does not really rise. But the problem is that the overall great majority, that they get more quiet, and that they privatize, that they are not the kind of tired of fighting and have more now social and economic problems to go to be active for the democracy, and this is the problem right now in Germany, and that is the reason why I am so engaged in on not only helping economically or socially, but also in engaging that we get this societal groups active, that everybody sees that democracy is alive, that we are a vivid democracy. And this is the reason we now do this law to promote democracy. This is the reason we also engage in a more strategy for engagement organizations, because they are in need. They also change. Activism now in Germany is not the same than activism was 10 or 20 years ago, new forms, etc. So there are some possibilities in helping by bureaucracy and all these things, and we have a lot of people who want to organize, but have some boundaries to law or other things. For example, some law things in Germany, Gemeinnützigkeit, for example. So these are things we really have to aim on. And another thing is, of course, that we must be clear, and we want more participation. We do have trouble right now, but the solution is not to depress the voices of the people, but that we get all them together to get more into the process, to get more participated. And therefore, we, as the so-called Lightning Coalition, we want to lower even the election age in Germany. Right now it's 18. We want to lower it to 16, also to give a clear signal to the youth that we are interested in what's their opinion of the world, because right now we not only play with their future, but with the Gegenwart. But even with the presence, so we need more involvement of the youth in this process and of all other people. So these different strategies in making this democracy vivid and seeable and livable everywhere. Not only there is a government, there on the several levels, but to tell something about what the voting mechanism is. It's not something of education only or of knowledge, but it's a question of how I feel involved in my society, in my democracy. And this is something I think is very important now to underline.
You have mentioned the bill that you're planning to introduce this year. But the German government has had a program called Demokratie lebt, Living Democracy, since I believe 2014. Several 100 million euros flowing into that since then, mostly into projects by NGOs, as you've mentioned. And this has been evaluated over and over again. It has also been seen very critical. But when you look at those evaluations, what type of project really works? What would you say? Could you be a bit more specific?
Well, actually, I must say I'm now minister for 7 months. I did not have the time to read all the evaluations during the last 10, 15 years, but I visited several projects within my 7 months right now. And I really think we need the variety we have. We do have problems and it evolved out of the children and youth politics within my government, within my ministry. Because we had some issues, some problems with the young people turning into extremism. And so we do have problems to give them the hand to get out of extremism again. So this is important, that you do have points all over Germany where young people can go to if they if they want to get out. And everybody knows how hard it is to get out of these groups again, either not only because they are your old friends and peer groups, but also because you are threatened often then with kind of physical and other kinds of violence. So this is really hard. So these projects are important that we do have them. But there is a big variety. For example, we do also have respect coaches right now in the schools because it all starts with a good, positive group social behavior. Mobbing is not something you would put into democratic theory, but still, yeah, if you have group dynamics which exclude minorities, which put some kind of negative, racist or hatred slogans within groups, then you have something that goes strongly against democracy. So we also finance respect coaches in schools, which do some education within groups, how to behave in a better way, and also how to be helped if you are a victim of these kinds of group things, because we all know that this, of course, should be not accepted within schools, but we all know that not in every school the whole line and every teacher and even the head of the school is doing that in everyday's life. So these kind of programs are important in kind of preventing bad things, and I think we can even do better in promoting democracy. But the spirit of all this is that democracy is here and not somewhere else, but democracy has to be lived and learned and practiced. This is all about democracy.
Connor has talked about specifically distrust in elections, and I think it's a lesser problem in Germany. The AfD has tried the same narrative, or at least I remember one instance where one AfD member of parliament has mentioned it in a speech on the floor of the German Bundestag, questioning the safety of vote-in, mail-in ballots in Germany too. Do you think this narrative has any change of catching on in Germany? Should we work against it now?
That the elections are not...
That elections could be fraud, that
well,
mail-in ballots could be prone to fraud.
I'm a citizen of the city of Berlin. And as you know, right now, it is rather secure that we will have re-elections in the city of Berlin, because there were some problems.
Organizational problems.
Organizational problems, and this is the reason we have to, Nachwahl, Neuwahl, Nachwahl, to redo the election. Of course, it's a bad thing that the organization was so bad, and that we did have these unclear, wrong. They had the wrong papers, and we had the marathon at the same time, at the same day. All kinds of irregular...
As several times before.
As several times before, but yeah, we had well, it was a big election. We had on one day the communal election, the federal election, the national election, and a voting on a referendum on one day, and it was COVID, so the Berlin administration just broke. And so, but the good thing is that we do have now a constitutional court, and on the Länder level and on the national level, and they had a hearing on all that, and we will have a democratic result, probably on all areas, which conclude in a Nachwahl, in a repetition of the election. So, but of course, the process, the thing for its own, is not really a good presenting card for democracy. Of course, this is a distrust, but in the result right now, as least the Berlin Constitutional Court, they say because the trust in democracy is so much at stake, we take this very, very serious, and we probably make a vote which is not only well, of course, it's a Rechtsentscheidung, but the hearing they had, some arguments they made were that they really feel it's a question of regaining and secure the trust of the people in the democracy, that it's also a statement, probably the result they will present on this question. So it's both. We do have this mistrust, and we do have also not everything works, but on the other hand, the process shows that democracy is working, and well, what the results will be, we will see. Yeah, but this is kind of the situation. Well,
right. So we thank you. We have talked about trust, and you've both talked about concepts how to regain trust of the citizens, how to make them trust in democracy again. Let's move on to another topic that you've both mentioned, which is even more severe, I believe, and that is political violence. You have it in the United States. You have mentioned several very severe cases here in Germany, including attacks on your office, but also graver attacks on people. People were killed. So how can it be countered, Connor? How do you think political violence can be countered in the US? Because you've mentioned it, it's so easy. It's showing up at people's houses, it's intimidating poll workers. It doesn't really take a lot to make people afraid to participate in the system, as you've both said, is very important.
Right, so I mean, part of this for us has just been really waking up law enforcement in the United States to the seriousness of these threats and the need to be prepared. So January 6th didn't have to turn out like January 6th. That's part of a separate investigation that the Capitol Police were woefully unprepared. Even when they tried to ring alarm bells too late, the response of our National Guard was interfered with and delayed. I mean, it was just, the whole thing was a horrible parade of errors. But, you know, lessons were learned from that, and I think at least as far as the U.S. Capitol goes, we're going to be ready for the next ones of that. State capitals, you know, we'll see. As far as individual members of Congress go, you know, even since the time that I've been there, the practices around security have been tightened up a lot. And, you know, just in my hometown, you know, the local police drive by my house. The local police have knocked on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning before if they thought they saw something unusual in my yard or around my house or whatever. And that happens a lot. So some of those things have changed from a basic security point of view, and similar at the polls. You know, in 2020, there was a pretty good security presence around a lot of polling places because some of this was talked about beforehand. So we'll continue perfecting those things. But to a certain degree, I think we have to call on our fellow citizens, and especially our fellow members of these progressive parties, to just have more courage and be more dedicated to what it is we're fighting for than the other side are. You know, the way I think of January 6th is that it was a day on which our opponents revealed to us the depth and ferocity of their commitment to what they want. Those people were so desperate to stop power from leaving the hands of Donald Trump and going to a Democratic president that they were willing to kill for it and really risk their own lives and futures over it in a way that's unprecedented in our history. So if they want it that much, you know, how much do we want it, and what are we willing to do, not in a violent way, but in an organizational way, in a campaigning way, in a strategic way in terms of the decisions we make and the resources we get. That's what it takes to win, and I think one of the themes of this week has been progressive movements, I think, can easily get bogged down in maybe our own internal disputes or differences of degree. And here we're dealing with a difference in kind. You know, the people that are opposing us do not want a small d democratic government or a small l liberal culture, and we do. And we just have to win the argument ultimately.
How about the role of the law enforcement agencies? And this is, I think since this is the Progressive Governance Conference, it's maybe not an easy topic because there's built into left movements, also built into progressive movements, distrust or a certain skepticism towards enforcing law enforcement, new laws, regulating law enforcement, giving them more personnel. How do you feel about it, and what's the discussion like in the United States right now?
Well, I'm a former member of law enforcement, so nothing to be scared of here, folks. You know, there are plenty of friendly and dedicated ones too. And honestly, my experience in that culture was that, regardless of where individual members of it may stand on other issues, that when people swore their oath to the Constitution of the United States, which is what you do in our country, they meant it. And you know, those Capitol Police officers in particular, some of them gave their lives, all of them risked their lives that day, and would do it. I know they would do it all over again. So I feel good about that part of it. I guess there's a much broader discussion in the United States about the culture of law enforcement overall and how we fix the relationship between the progressive side and our police officers and law enforcement, and that's a hard one for us. We haven't figured that one out yet, so maybe you guys can tell me.
We have 5 minutes left only, but I would like to get to one last topic, which is disinformation. And I think it's interesting to speak about that in the German-American context, because we sort of have a very different philosophy here. Lisa Paus, we have had the Netzdurchsetzungsgesetz, the law to enforce good behavior on the internet. So in Germany now, the big companies providing those platforms can be fined if they don't take down content that's inciting violence or that's misinformation. Lisa Paus, do you feel that this is working, or do you feel that your government has to tweak it a little more?
It is working, but we all learned that misinformation, and disinformation, and fake information always is so much quicker than the right information, and this is really a problem. Of course, there are still things we have to look on, the whole topic cybersecurity. Now, of course, is a new dimension. It's not only the normal fake news thing, which was the idea of this Netzdurchsetzungsgesetz, but of course we are in a war in Europe right now. And we know that, of course, Russia, maybe also others, but especially Russia, is very, very strongly active in producing fake news within the German media in all kinds of ways, and this is really a trouble in a also very in a already very not stable situation. This is really destabilizing, and people they see it and they post it again, and and every wrong tweet and every wrong Facebook or whatever information is really destructive against democracy. And the problem is that we had some examples right now. For example, Friedrich Merz, who is the leader of the Conservative Party in Germany. He all of a sudden brought 2 weeks ago the issue on the table. We have social tourism for Ukrainian refugees. And afterwards, it was known that he also fell on this fake news produced from probably Russia. He did not have the standing to completely apologize for that, but still, you see the dimension. You see the dimension how fast this wrong information get into very, very high levels and produce a destructive situation for the democracy, even in the kind of within the democratic parties. And this is again also a sign that it's really important that at least the democratic parties get to a better set of criteria in dealing with each other, that we do not have to have the same opinions, but we have to agree on some basic battle grounds and methods we accept with another, which are basics in democracy, but in these days obviously have to be renewed and relearned.
Connor, how about the US? I know that Congress has heard some of the heads of the big social media companies this year, but should legislation be part of bringing them to take more responsibility for the content provided by their on their platforms?
Absolutely, and this is an area in which we're behind, and I believe we owe the world a better solution because many of these companies came from the United States in the first place. But we have not been able to summon the political will to act. I think one of the important things we need to do is really talk about the way these companies have the capability. I'm not going to say it's easy, but they have the capability to change their products to mitigate the damage here. You know, there's an example I heard recently of Amazon released this new, I believe it was the new Lord of the Rings series on Amazon Prime Video. And in the first 24 hours, some group of people more or less hacked and invaded the comments section of that app and really were putting disparaging and even false things about that series that made it look like people weren't pleased. And within 24 hours, Amazon had re-engineered the entire thing. You couldn't find any access to the negative stuff, and it was magically filled with positive comments about how great the series was. So none of these companies can tell me that they couldn't have taken action on January 5th and 6th with respect to all these communications. When Twitter finally banned Trump, you know how much election-related misinformation was reduced on that platform in the United States? Half of all election-related information was gone from Twitter with the elimination of a single account. But we don't force them to do these things. They do it. So, I mean, the simplest thing we really could do is open them up to that great American tradition of a lawsuit. And a lot of this stuff would take care of itself very quickly. So many of us believe that's the direction we should go.
All right, I think our time is up, but thank you both very much. This was a lot for only 45 minutes, and let's stay tuned. Let's keep discussing and form a progressive agenda to save democracy. Thank you.